Nathan Harper tremblingly wrote the final signature on the document, thereby securing the largest contract of his career. The ink pen left a graceful stroke on the cream paper, and Nathan's heart began to beat with joy. This contract promised not only a promotion, but also the financial stability that he and his wife had dreamed of for so long. It seemed to him that now their future was finally taking on clear contours. A new house in the suburbs, travel, perhaps a child, everything they talked about on warm evenings. However, along with the euphoria of achievement, an incomprehensible anxiety awoke within him. When the handshakes with partners were left behind and the noise of voices died down, Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't immediately understand the reason. Maybe it was just overstrain from weeks of negotiations, or maybe something deeper. Leaving the office into the twilight autumn evening, he paused for a moment at the glass doors, looking at his reflection. A 30-year-old man with light gray hair at the temples looked back with tired green eyes. He ran his hand through his brown hair, trying to drive away the obsession. Everything is fine, he convinced himself, going down the steps. The contract has been signed. Lainey will be happy. We've been working towards this for so long. He dialed his wife's number, wanting to share the good news. The phone was picked up almost immediately. "Hello, dear." Lainey's familiar gentle voice came through the phone. "How did it go?" "We did it," Nathan answered with a smile, feeling the warmth spreading through his chest. "The contract has been signed. Imagine, now everything will be different for us. I can already see how you and I are choosing a new house by the lake or planning a trip to the sea." Lainey laughed joyfully, and this sound for a moment dispelled the shadows of anxiety in Nathan's soul. She started asking about details, about how everything went at the meeting. Nathan spoke with pleasure, gesticulating animatedly with his free hand, although his wife could not see it. He felt her sincere support across the distance. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly. "You are so talented. Shall we celebrate this evening? I just made your favorite pie." "Of course, my love." "I'll be home in half an hour," he replied, rejoicing at the prospect of a cozy family evening. Turning off the call, Nathan took a deep breath of cool air. It would seem that everything is working out perfectly. The golden lights of the city were lighting up all around, the last bicycles of couriers were ringing, and somewhere in the distance the stream of evening cars was noisy. Autumn smelled of wet leaves and something new and promising. But the closer he got to their small, cozy house, the stronger a strange lump of anxiety became inside. For no apparent reason, my heart began to pound. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter. He even stopped at a red light, although the road was deserted, and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm down. The thought flashed through my head, why should I worry? Maybe I just don't believe my luck. As a child, Nathan's mother often said, "When a good thing is too good, expect a catch." Maybe these were the words that were echoing now. He was afraid to frighten away his happiness. Everything seemed fragile, like thin crystal. If you press harder, it will crack. He parked the car at the house. There was a warm light burning in the living room windows, and through the curtains a familiar setting was visible. A soft lamp, a book he had left on the table in the morning, a neatly tidied sofa. Lainey always kept order and comfort. Her care for the home is one of those qualities for which he fell in love with her even more after the wedding. Walking inside, Nathan smelled apple pie and cinnamon, his favorite. A lump suddenly formed in my throat from the rush of feelings. How wonderful she is, he thought, putting his briefcase by the door. The wife peeked out from the kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back into a messy bun, flour on her cheek. "Welcome back, hero," Lainey smiled, wiping her hands on a towel. Pride shone in her blue eyes. Nathan came closer and hugged her, feeling how warm and familiar she was in his arms. The kiss was soft, tasting of sugar and cinnamon. At this moment, all worries subsided. It was just the two of them, a team that had gone through hardships and emerged victorious. "I'm so glad it worked out," Lainey whispered, clinging to his chest. "You worked so hard for this." He stroked her back, closing his eyes. "I couldn't have achieved anything without your faith in me, honey." They moved to the kitchen. There were already 2 plates on the table, with a rosy pie in the center. Laney poured tea and carefully pushed a mug with his favorite picture of a kitten, a gift from her, towards her husband. "Tell me everything," she asked, sitting down opposite. "I want to know how you spent that day, what your partners said, how you felt." Nathan, trying to drive away the remnants of incomprehensible excitement, recounted in detail the course of the negotiations, the funny moments, how one of the partners almost threw water on the documents, how everyone laughed and the tension subsided. Lainey listened with her chin in her hand and smiled where needed, shaking her head sympathetically when he mentioned difficulties. Everything seemed to be perfect. But somewhere deep inside, a small ember of worry continued to smolder. Nathan's gaze sometimes involuntarily lingered on his wife a little longer. He tried to catch something new, alien in her features, to understand the source of vague anxiety. She seemed the same, his Laney, tender and loving, maybe a little more tired than usual. At some point, noticing his attentive gaze, she asked, "Did something happen? Am I dirty?" and ran her palm over her cheek, thinking that she had a trace of flour. "No, no, everything is fine," Nathan hastened to assure her and smiled. "I'm just admiring you." She smiled back, but something flashed in her eyes, perhaps guilt or worry, but so quickly that Nathan wasn't sure if it was just his imagination. The next moment, Laney was already standing up to cut the pie, looking away. The evening passed calmly and happily. They laughed, made plans, remembered how they dreamed of just such a moment. Laney suggested we go see a new cottage this weekend that the realtor had recently talked about. Nathan enthusiastically supported the idea. Planning for the future, they seemed like the most ordinary happy family. It was only late at night, when Laney was already asleep, curled up at her side, that Nathan lay with his eyes open, looking at the ceiling. The silence of the bedroom was broken only by her steady breathing. He carefully ran his fingers through her hair, trying not to wake her. "I love you," he whispered silently in the darkness. And yet the heart did not let go of a strange feeling, as if clouds were gathering over their well-being. Laney's face appeared before his mind's eye with that elusive expression he had noticed at dinner. It suddenly occurred to him that perhaps it was his own fears that were spoiling the moment of happiness. He has been pursuing this goal for too long and is now afraid of losing it. "Just sleep, stupid," Nathan thought to himself with a soft grin. "You have a wonderful wife, a great job, and now you have a promotion. Stop looking for problems where there are none." He hugged Laney tighter, closed his eyes, and tried to push away all the gloomy forebodings. A new life lay ahead of them, he was sure that it would be so. But a quiet voice in the depths of his soul seemed to whisper otherwise, warning of a coming storm that Nathan could not yet understand or prevent. A week has passed since the momentous signing of the contract. Life was settling into its own rut. During the day, Nathan would plunge headlong into working on a new project, and in the evening he would rush home, where Laney would be waiting for him with dinner or a warm hug. Everything seemed to be fine, at least Nathan tried to believe it, pushing away the memories of that strange anxiety. He convinced himself that he was simply overtired. One of these evenings, returning from work a little later than usual, he found Laney dozing off on the sofa, waiting for him. The television was playing quietly, illuminating the room with flickering light. Nathan quietly covered his wife with a blanket and went to the kitchen to heat up the dinner she had prepared. On the table were plates of cooked pasta and glasses with dried drops of red wine. Apparently, Laney tried to wait for him, but fatigue took its toll. Smiling tenderly, he put the dishes away and decided that he would eat later. First, he carefully carried his sleepy wife into the bedroom and laid her on the bed. She just muttered something unintelligible, not waking up when he took off her jeans and covered her with a blanket. After kissing her forehead, Nathan quietly left, trying not to creak the door. Returning to the kitchen, he finished his dinner alone, listening to the silence of the house. My thoughts wandered. He remembered today's conversation with a colleague about an upcoming business trip. In a couple of days, he needed to leave for a few days on business with a new contract. Nathan thought that he would have to discuss this with Laney tomorrow, plan how she would be here without him. After dinner, he decided to do some small household chores, since time allowed. I collected the scattered clothes to throw in the wash. In the bathroom, while sorting laundry, he came across something unusual. Lena's jeans, which he had previously helped her get out of, lay abandoned on the floor. Her lacy white panties were visible next to them. Nathan was about to pick them up to throw them into the laundry basket when his gaze froze. There was a small dark spot on the groin part of the light lace fabric, barely noticeable in the dim light of the bathroom. He frowned and brought the fabric closer to his eyes. The heart skipped a beat. Something yellowish-brown and dried actually appeared on the snow-white lace. It's like a trace of dried liquid. Nathan's frown deepened. At first, he didn't understand what it was, but suddenly nausea came to his throat. The smell, the faint scent of a man's footprint mixed with the scent of her perfume. My hands began to shake. He knew this smell too well, the smell of their love, intimacy. But now the smell burned him like acid, because last night they had not made love. And in the last days, there was almost no intimacy. Laney complained of fatigue, but he did not insist, thinking that there would be time ahead when work would settle down. This can't be, flashed through his head. But the facts stubbornly stared him in the face. The stain on the panties is clearly not from him. My throat felt a spasm. Nathan grabbed the edge of the sink, staring at his pale face in the mirror. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like it was about to jump out of my chest. He looked again at the tiny, incriminating mark on the underwear. The mind raced feverishly. Maybe she. Maybe it's something else. Maybe I'm wrong. He desperately searched for an innocent explanation. Maybe Laney accidentally got dirty with something? Egg cream? Pie filling? But why then this smell, recognizable, intimate? Nathan felt like everything was collapsing inside. It's as if the floor under your feet is falling into a bottomless pit. He wanted to immediately wake up his wife and demand an explanation. Anger and pain surged, rising in my throat with a strangled cry. But he forced himself to stop. He stood there, breathing heavily, clutching the thin lace fabric in his fist. If this is really what he's thinking, then being rash will only ruin everything. She will probably deny everything. Or, what if he is wrong and now unfairly accuses her? This thought sobered me up for a moment. Nathan slowly unclenched his fingers. Laney's panties hung limply in his hand, a symbol of his worst fears. With trembling hands, he took from the closet a small transparent bag with a zipper, which was used for traveling for change. Carefully, as if it were material evidence, he placed the laundry there, trying not to touch the stain. It all seemed crazy to him. Did he really think of his wife's betrayal as an accomplished crime, with evidence and evidence? Nathan closed the bag and hid it on the top shelf of the closet behind the towels. Then he sat down on the edge of the bathtub, covering his face with his hands. A sharp pain tore through my chest. Before his inner gaze, pictures arose, one more terrible than the other. Laney with another man, her passionate moans, as with him before, strange hands on her body. He jumped up, unable to continue these painful images. Something had to be done. The mind demanded clarity. If what he found is true, he needs to know with whom, when, why. Questions came like an avalanche. When could she? He recalled that a couple of times in recent months, Laney had returned home later than usual, citing delays at work or meetings with a friend. Then he didn't attach any importance. Maybe then, or maybe while he was at work during the day. Nathan walked into the living room, trying to tiptoe so as not to wake his wife. I took the phone and went out onto the porch, where the night air hit my hot face. His hands were still shaking as he searched the contact list for the number he needed. His longtime friend, Dana Reyes, worked as a family law attorney. He had not spoken to her for many years, but had heard that she had become a good lawyer. Nathan looked for a long time at the screen where her name was glowing. Finally, taking a deep breath, he pressed the call button. The receiver buzzed briefly, and almost immediately a cheerful female voice was heard. Dana Reyes, I'm listening. Dana, hi, this is Nathan Harper. I don't know if you remember me. We studied at university together, he said hoarsely, feeling a lump stuck in his throat. Nathan, of course, I remember how many years. Dana's voice sounded surprised, mixed with joy. How are you? What do I owe? It's too late to call. Nathan ran a hand over his face, gathering his courage. Sorry to barge into your evening, but I really need your help as a lawyer. And, as a friend, the last words came out almost in a whisper. There was a short pause on the phone. Then Dana answered seriously. What's happened? I need to see you. The sooner the better. It's personal. Family. His voice trembled treacherously on the last word. Dana instantly understood the tone. Tomorrow morning, I will be in the office from 9. Come, I'll cancel everything if necessary. Hang in there, Nathan. Thank you, he whispered and passed out. In the morning, Nathan arrived at Dana's office ahead of schedule, having not slept a wink all night. He sat on the porch for several hours, looking into the darkness and trying to get his thoughts in order. By dawn, all he had left was a firm determination to find out the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. Dana turned out to be a short, thin woman with short dark hair and piercing brown eyes. At university, she was lively and straightforward, and it seems that the years have only hardened these qualities. As soon as she saw Nathan, she hugged him in a friendly manner without further ado. He barely managed to squeeze out a semblance of a smile. When they settled into her small but cozy office, Dana softly asked, "Tell me." The words didn't come at first. Nathan looked down at his clenched fingers. Then he took out the same bag of underwear from the inside pocket of his jacket. He placed it on the table in front of Dana. My heart began to beat painfully in my chest again, as if I was reliving the discovery of the previous night. Dana glanced at the package, then at him. Hesitantly, she took the package in her hands and examined the contents, raising an eyebrow questioningly. "This is—" Nathan began huskily, swallowing. "This belongs to my wife, and what you see looks like another man, not mine." Dana exhaled quietly and put the bag aside. Her gaze flashed with the compassion and concentration of a professional. "When did you find this?" "Late last night. She fell asleep without waiting for me. I discovered." He felt hot shame flooding his neck and cheeks when he was collecting things for washing. Dana nodded. "Are you sure it's not yours?" Nathan clenched his fists, resting his white knuckles on his knees. "We haven't been close for over a week, and I couldn't help but notice it. The smell." He fell silent, closing his eyes, trying to cope with his excitement. "I understand," she answered softly. "I'm sorry, Nathan." He raised his head sharply. Anger flashed in his eyes, and he spoke in a broken whisper. "I must know the truth, Dana. I need to understand to whom and for how long this has been happening. And what should I do now?" "Do you want to get a divorce?" she asked directly. Nathan opened his mouth, but the word stuck. Divorce? Just yesterday, this thought seemed impossible. He loved Lainey, he made plans with her. And now, destroy everything? But he could not live in ignorance or lies. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "First, the truth." Dana leaned back in her chair, watching him with an attentive gaze. Then she leaned forward decisively. "Okay, first of all, you need evidence. What you found is serious, but it is better to have more information. I can hire a private investigator on your behalf. I have a good specialist, Clark Mercer. He did things like this for my clients." Nathan nodded, listening to her confident business tone, clinging to it like a lifeline. "Clark can follow Lainey, find out who she's dating, where she's going," Dana continued. "If she's cheating, he'll find out. For now, you should." She paused. "Try to behave as usual. Don't tell her anything. Collect more information." Nathan swallowed a bitter lump. "Behave as usual," he repeated mechanically. "It won't be easy. I understand. But if you want to get to the bottom of the truth, you need patience. And also," she looked at him seriously, "given the new contract and your increased income, it's worth thinking about protecting your finances. If it comes to divorce, we need to be prepared." He rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. So much was falling at once. "Do what you need to do," he whispered. Dana gently touched his arm with her palm. "You're not alone, do you hear? I'll help as much as I can. There was so much sympathy in her warm words, and look that Nathan felt tears welling up in his eyes. He blinked quickly, shooing them away. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking away to the window. It was a sunny, clear day behind the glass, but for him everything seemed to have gone dark. "I never thought that one day I would find myself in this position." "Nobody thinks," Dana sighed. "But now the main thing is to find out everything to the end. Keep me posted." They agreed that Detective Clark Mercer would contact Nathan as soon as possible. After saying goodbye, Nathan left the office with a heavy heart. He felt both empty and full of boiling pain. It seemed like the whole world had turned upside down overnight. In the parking lot, he got into the car and closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the steering wheel. There was a pounding in my head. This is not a dream. This is my life. My happiness is crumbling. But at the same time, a new feeling arose inside, the determination to find out the truth at any cost. Nathan started the engine and drove the car home. There were still a couple of days ahead before leaving on a business trip, a couple of days of pretending that everything was fine, while suspicion and pain were stirring in a ball in my soul. He didn't know how he could cope, but there was no other choice. Clark Mercer will soon get down to business, and then the masks will fall, no matter how terrible his future path may be. 2 days later, at dawn, Nathan was leaving on a business trip. Farewell to Lainey turned out to be restrained. He kissed her on the cheek at the airport door, hugged her tightly for a moment, but felt an invisible wall frozen between them. Lainey noticed his tension and smiled tiredly. "Everything will be fine. A couple of days will fly by quickly." He just nodded, not trusting his voice. Inside, he was torn by contradiction. He wanted to ask directly, demand an explanation, but Dana convinced him to wait for the results of the investigation. So he only said, "Take care of yourself, okay?" "Of course, darling," she answered, looking into his eyes a little guiltily, as if guessing his anxiety. "I'll try not to get bored." Her words sounded joking, but not too confident. Nathan forced a smile, turned around, and walked toward the front desk without looking back. He was scared. What if he saw relief on her face that he was leaving? The plane took off into the pale blue morning sky, and Nathan's heart remained far below along with his doubts and pain. He tried to concentrate on work, on upcoming meetings, but his thoughts kept returning to Lainey. I endlessly thought about it in my head. What if he was wrong? What if that spot is not what it seems? But then what? She didn't show by word or gesture that anything was wrong. Or did he just not notice? Later that evening, after finishing his business, Nathan returned to his hotel room. The silence of someone else's room only increased his anxiety. He dialed his wife's number, wanting to hear her voice. The beeps went on for too long. Finally, when he was about to hear the answering machine, the phone on the other end was picked up. Instead of a greeting, Nathan heard loud music and the noise of voices. He pulled the phone away from his ear and looked at the screen in surprise. The connection had definitely been established. It was Lainey's number. "Hello?" he shouted, trying to block out the extraneous noise. "Yes, yes. Hello?" Lainey's voice was drowned in a rumble. "Nathan? Bad. Audible. Lainey, where are you?" Alarm was already rising in my chest. At this time, she is usually at home or with a friend, but it seems that she is clearly not at home. "I am with a friend," she shouted back after a pause. "We, celebrate. A birthday." Her voice sounded tense and unnatural. Nathan squinted, clutching his phone. She's lying, he realized instantly. Which other friend is having a holiday now? Why didn't you tell me in advance? "What? Whose birthday is it?" he asked as calmly as possible, although his heart was already pounding. There was a pause in the receiver, only the music thundered, bringing snatches of some pop song. At Kay's." "Yes, Katie's," Lainey finally answered. "Darling, it's very noisy here. I'll call you back." And the connection was cut off. Nathan was dumbfounded, looking at the blank screen. Lainey was not a skilled liar. He immediately realized there is no Katie now, and the music. It's like a party in a club or bar. But she said, At a friend's place. A guess flashed through my head, making my temples ache. A party at Griffin Sloane's. The boss mentioned something about an event at his house this week. And Lainey, it seems, said recently that she was offered a part-time job as a waitress at someone's celebration. Then he didn't attach any importance. Lainey sometimes worked part-time at events for a catering company she knew. She liked the variety and a little money of her own. Now all the pieces fit. She's probably at her boss's party, and she lied to him about it. For what? Maybe he wouldn't be jealous of the rich, but rather because there could be that very someone with whom she has a connection. Nathan rushed to his laptop, feeling panic fill his chest. Opening the messenger, he quickly wrote a short message to Dana and Detective Clark, saying that Lainey seemed to be at some kind of party, possibly at Griffin Sloane's. After a few agonizing minutes, the detective replied, I'll check Sloane's address and go there. All that was left to do was wait. Nathan was pacing around the room like a caged animal. He tried calling his wife again, to no avail. Then he dialed her best friend, Alice, with whom Lainey was supposedly with. The friend answered in a sleepy voice that there was no party and she hadn't seen Lainey today. This finally confirmed. His wife blatantly lied to him. The phone in his hand vibrated a message from Clark. Sloane's house is on the outskirts. A large mansion. Your wife's car is at the gate. I'll try to get inside under the guise of service personnel. Nathan could only walk in circles. The minutes dragged on painfully. Imaginative pictures again and again depicted Lainey next to someone else. With Griffin, or with someone else. What's going on there? Why is there such music? An hour later, the detective sent an update. Lots of guests. Celebration. Lainey is working as a drink server. Sloane has his eye on her. Nathan, reading this message, slammed his fist on the table. Never before in his life had he felt such helpless rage. He wanted to immediately rush back home, rush into this party, and take his wife away. But he was hundreds of kilometers away. After some time, a new message came from Clark, a short one. It seems that everything is ending. The guests are leaving. Your wife is not yet visible from the outside. Nathan's heart sank. He stared at the screen, waiting for more, but there was none. A long 20 minutes of silence. Then, Lainey left the house with Sloane. They were talking about something in the car. She's laughing. Now they're back inside. Looks like she's staying. These words seemed to burn into Nathan's eyes like a hot iron. She's staying. His palms were sweaty and his breathing was labored. He couldn't find a place for himself. The night call from the detective came long after midnight. Nathan grabbed the phone before the first ring sounded. Speak, he blurted out. Clark's tired voice came from the other end. Your wife is still nowhere to be seen from the outside. I waited until almost everyone had left. Looks like she stayed with Sloane. Nathan's throat tightened. Although he was waiting for this confirmation, it sounded like a sentence. Are you sure? He asked hoarsely, hoping for a miracle. Her car is still here. The lights went out in the house. I didn't see her leave. Nathan clenched the phone until his fingers turned white. Thank you, Clark, he barely managed to say. Come back, and please send me a full report. Photos, videos, if possible. Of course, the detective responded. Hang in there, Nathan. The all-clear signal sounded. Nathan sank onto the carpet in the middle of the room, as if his legs could no longer support him. She really stayed. With someone else's man. With his boss. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Outside the window, a strange city glowed with night lights, and Nathan's chest flared up with emptiness, mixed with rage. He slammed his fist down on the floor, feeling a scream rising in his throat that couldn't be released. For the first time in a long time, tears came to my eyes hot, angry. Everything collapsed. The night became painfully long for him. The morning flight home lay ahead, and Nathan had never counted the minutes until he returned in such pain. Nathan took the first flight back in the morning. On the way, he barely found a place for himself. In the morning, he nevertheless fell into a disturbing dream in which he saw Lainey going into the darkness, and he was reaching out to her and could not catch up. I woke up in a cold sweat, a minute before the plane landed. He didn't know what was waiting for him at home, but he was terribly afraid of it. Unable to bear the uncertainty, right at the airport, as soon as he got off the ramp, he dialed his wife's number. The beeps continued for a long time again. Finally, her voice was heard, this time quiet, as if sleepy. "Lainey," he breathed into the phone, surprised at how tense his voice sounded. "Where are you?" "At home, of course." "Where else?" she answered after a short pause. "Are you sleeping?" he asked, feeling like his heart was about to jump out of his chest. She answered the phone for too long, maybe she was really asleep. "Yes, I was so tired yesterday. I went to bed early." Her voice sounded uncertain. "Are you already flying?" Nathan closed his eyes. She didn't even know he was already in town. Something didn't add up in her words. She was tired and went to bed early, but she didn't answer right away, as if she had to wake her up. But perhaps she was just fast asleep. "I've landed," he said decisively. "I'll be there soon." He didn't want to warn her for a long time in advance, let her think that he would appear any minute. Perhaps this will make her nervous and give her away a lie. "Oh, so fast." There was excitement in Lainey's voice. "You said this evening." "I decided to fly out early. I really missed you." He tried to add warmth to his voice, although everything inside was clenching with disgust at this pretense. I'm very glad," she responded hastily. "I'm waiting for you, my love." Nathan hung up, feeling the bitter taste on his tongue. "Darling." This word made me want to wince now. Nevertheless, he did not go home, but to the appointed place, a small cafe in the city center, where he was supposed to meet with Clark Mercer. The detective was already waiting for him at a table in the corner, coffee cooling in front of him. Clark rose to meet him, firmly shook his hand, looking expressively into Nathan's face. "How are you?" he asked quietly, like a man who didn't sleep and lost what he thought was his life. Nathan answered with a forced smile, sinking into a chair. "What do you have?" Clark nodded and took a thin folder from his briefcase. "Here is my preliminary report and the photographs that we managed to take." Nathan paused before deciding to take the folder. My hands trembled treacherously. "Tell me, in your own words," he said quietly, still putting the folder aside without opening it yet. He was afraid to see what was inside. The detective leaned back in his chair and began his report in a calm, professional tone. "I arrived at Griffin Sloane's mansion around 10 o'clock in the evening. Guests' cars were parked in the driveway and loud music was playing. I introduced myself as a catering employee, and security let me inside to help the bartender. So I watched everything from the inside for a while." "And Lainey?" Nathan gasped, clenching his fists under the table. "Your wife was serving drinks to the guests." Clark nodded. "She was dressed like other service personnel. Black skirt, white blouse. She looked—" He paused, searching for a word. "Very attractive. Many guests paid attention to her, and Sloane himself. He was always somewhere nearby, either joking with her or helping to bring trays, although this clearly went beyond the behavior of the owner with the staff." Nathan's face flushed with jealousy and anger, but he remained silent, allowing Clark to continue. "I took several pictures on my phone when he touched her well, supposedly by accident. He straightened a strand of hair, put his hand on her waist. She did not move away, but laughed in response to his words. She seemed flattered by his attention." Nathan closed his eyes, trying to contain his rage. The picture the detective painted hit him harder than a fist. "Towards midnight, the guests began to leave," Mercer continued. "I also had to leave so as not to arouse suspicion. But I stayed in the car outside waiting. Your wife left the house at approximately 1 a.m. with Sloane and his son." "Son?" Nathan looked at him in surprise. He knew that Griffin Sloane had a grown son, Travis, about 20 years old, a student. But what does he have to do with it? Clark pursed his lips. "Yes, Travis Sloane was at the party too. He also paid attention to your wife, judging by my observations. He danced with her and treated her to champagne." Nathan's insides went cold. He felt nauseous from the new details. So, around 1 o'clock in the morning, the three of them went out onto the porch. Lainey said she needed to go to the parking lot or something like that, and asked Sloane to convey her gratitude to the owner. Apparently, they needed to show security that she was leaving. But in fact, the detective looked away. After the last guests had left, your wife returned to the house with Sloane and his son. No matter how Nathan prepared himself, these words pierced him. The picture became increasingly gloomy. I didn't see her again, Clark concluded. I waited until 3 in the morning. Laney's car was parked outside the mansion all night. The lights in the house went out around 2. I assumed that she stayed overnight, which I informed you about. Nathan exhaled, trying to stop shaking. He took the folder and opened it. The first photos showed Laney, smiling, holding a tray among the guests. Griffin Sloane leaned over, saying something in her ear, and his hand lay on the small of her back. The other is Travis, a tall, blond guy who hands Laney a glass, their fingers touching, and she looks at him with excitement. Nathan felt his insides turn over. Next, Sloane helps Laney put on her coat on the porch as they step out together. She really looks like she's about to leave coat, purse in hand. But the last shot, Laney, Sloane, and Travis, already without their coats, again enter the slightly open door of the house. The photo was taken from afar, blurry, but recognizable. Nathan's hands shook as he looked at this silent evidence. His eyes burned from the tears he was holding back, but he did not allow himself to cry. "Is there anything else?" he asked hoarsely. Clark nodded. "There is information about what happened next, but I would prefer to show them not here. We might be able to get some video footage. Sloane is famous for its debauched get-togethers, and one of the staff could have recorded what was happening." "Depraved?" Nathan asked, horror ringing in his voice. "What do you mean by this?" The detective looked at him sympathetically, but directly. "I'm afraid your wife got involved in something more than just adultery with one person yesterday. I'll try to get proof soon." Nathan closed the folder and dropped it on the table. The heartbeat is dull and painful. He understood what Clark was implying, but refused to accept it. "Thank you," was all he could say as he stood up. "My legs were hard to control. Send everything you find to Dana right away." "Definitely," the detective answered quietly. "Hang in there, Nathan." Nathan nodded and, not remembering himself, left the cafe. On the way home, he stopped several times on the side of the road to catch his breath and calm the incoming panic. It seemed as if a brittle tremor was running through my whole body. Depraved gatherings. What does this mean? 10 men? No, not this. His thoughts were racing, bumping into forbidden images that he immediately drove away, because otherwise he would go crazy. When he finally pulled up to his house late that morning, Laney's car was parked in the driveway. She was at home. Anger immediately boiled in my chest, and she returned safely as if nothing had happened. How will she look him in the eye? Nathan took several deep breaths before getting out of the car. He had to maintain a semblance of calm until all the evidence was received. It seemed like an impossible task, but he tried for the ultimate goal. The door opened and Laney appeared on the threshold. She was wearing a dressing gown. Her hair was damp, apparently just from the shower. Seeing her husband, she froze for a moment, then put on a joyful smile. "Nathan, are you home?" She stepped towards him with open arms. He allowed her to hug him and kiss him on the cheek, and he barely touched her back with his hand. Her freshly washed body smelled of floral shampoo, but Nathan could almost physically feel the ghostly smell of someone else's cologne and sin that seemed to be ingrained into her skin. "How did you get there? Are you hungry?" Laney jabbered, trying to avoid his gaze. "I decided to take a shower because yesterday I fell asleep. I don't remember how I got into bed." He looked at her carefully. On his neck, just above the collar of his robe, he noticed a darkish spot, like a small bruise, a hickey. Laney noticed where his gaze was directed and hastily adjusted her collar. "Tired, you say?" he asked quietly with an involuntary cold note. "Yes, we stayed at Katie's, watched a movie," she stammered. "I didn't even notice how I passed out. This morning I barely woke up. My head was heavy. Probably there was too much wine yesterday. Nathan didn't answer. His silence hung like a heavy reproach. Lainey finally looked him in the eye and quickly looked away. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked anxiously. "You're kind of pale." He forced himself to turn away and walk into the living room. A little tired from the road. "Okay, I need to sort things out." He walked away, leaving her standing in confusion. In the bedroom, Nathan closed the door and finally allowed himself to release at least some of his emotions. He punched the wall with force. Pain flared up in my knuckles, pulsing through me. But this physical pain was insignificant compared to the torment in the soul. The tears came again, and this time he didn't hold them back. Quietly, so Lainey wouldn't hear, Nathan let loose his sobs. He mourned his love, his trust, his past life, which would never be the same. The next day, Dana Reyes called Nathan early, her voice tense. "Come." Clark got what he needed. I received everything right away. Nathan felt his heart sink. Now he will know the whole truth. It seemed to him that he had prepared for the worst, but still these words sent a chill through his skin. "I'll be there in half an hour," he answered hoarsely. In Dana's office, the curtains were drawn, only the desk lamp illuminated the documents and laptop on her desk. Dana met Nathan with a serious look and lightly touched his shoulder. "You need to be ready. It's heavy." He nodded, not trusting his voice. They sat down in front of the laptop screen. Dana opened the video player. A blurry image of the room first appeared on the screen, then the focus leveled out. "This was filmed by one of the staff on the phone," Dana explained quietly. "Clark managed to get the file. Apparently someone was going to use it for blackmail, but sold it to us." Nathan said nothing, peering at the picture. The video showed the luxurious living room of the Sloan mansion, illuminated by soft golden light. In the corners one could see the remains of the banquet, half-empty bottles, crumpled napkins. Lainey was sitting in the center on a large sofa. His Lainey only now she looked unrecognizable. Her unbuttoned blouse hung from her shoulders, her skirt had ridden up. Several men crouched close to her. Nathan immediately recognized Griffin Sloan. He was lounging imposingly on the sofa to Lainey's left hand, his hand resting on her thigh. To her right was Travis, Sloan's son, with a cheeky grin on his face. He had one arm around Lainey's waist and the other holding a glass. Nathan clenched his teeth until they ached. But that was just the beginning. There were more men standing or sitting around the sofa in total, as his sharp eyes noticed about 10 people, not counting Lainey. They all looked at her with predatory interest, talked to each other, and grinned. Someone was pouring a drink. Lainey looked. Nathan hated to admit it, but in the recording she didn't seem like a victim at all. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips glistened wetly, she smiled drunkenly, running her hand over Travis' chest. Then she stood up slightly, saying something there was no sound, but the expressions on the men's faces suggested, apparently, an obscene joke or proposal. Several people laughed approvingly. Griffin grinned too and leaned towards her, pressing a kiss to her neck. Nathan involuntarily recoiled from the screen as if he saw something burning. But he could no longer stop watching like a rabbit hypnotized by a snake. He looked in horror. Griffin could be seen leisurely undoing the buttons on Lainey's remaining clothes. One of the men deftly pulled off her blouse. Lainey laughed, throwing her head back. Travis pressed his lips to hers, and she responded passionately. The men's hands reached out to her naked body. The video began to shake, and it was clear that the person filming had moved, trying to get a closer look at what was happening. Then something unimaginable began, turning into a blurry kaleidoscope of lust. Lainey was already lying on the couch, her clothes almost completely torn off. Griffin Sloan loomed over her, the movement of his body clearly indicating that he was having sex with her. Lainey arched towards him, a smile and a grimace of pleasure sliding across her face. Another man immediately appeared nearby. Nathan didn't know his name. Some guests from the party. He took her hand and directed it to his dignity. Lainey listened obediently, continuing to moan from Griffin's rhythmic thrusts. Travis, meanwhile, settled himself at the head of the bed, intertwining his fingers in her hair. Another man, completely naked, of a thick build took a place at Laney's feet, next to Griffin, apparently waiting for his turn. The jokes, giggles, and excited remarks in the room seemed to get louder as several men could be seen watching. "Enough," Nathan suddenly croaked, unable to look any further. He pulled back from the screen, putting his hand to his mouth. His face was burning, his eyes were dark. Everything in his stomach was turning over. It seemed that in another second he would vomit right on the table. Dana immediately pressed pause. The frozen shot showed Laney with her eyes closed in pleasure, her mouth slightly open, her chest pressed against Griffin's bare chest, while Travis kissed her shoulder and the other man knelt on the couch, grabbing her thigh. Nathan turned away, trembling. His breathing became rapid and shallow. "I'm sorry." Dana put her hand on his back, calming him. "I'm so sorry, Nathan." He couldn't answer right away. Gathering his will into a fist, he forced himself to remove his hand from his mouth and straighten up. "My throat was sore. Is the whole file like this?" he asked hoarsely, without looking at the screen. Dana sneered. "There's about 15 minutes. Of this, the end of the holiday. Your wife." She fell silent, realizing that words were unnecessary. Nathan closed his eyes, trying to drive away the obsession, but the images he saw seemed to be imprinted forever. Laney, his only love, in the arms of a crowd of men, taking them all in turn, like a toy. He wanted to hit his head against the wall, just to knock it out of his memory, or kill everyone who was there. Dana, meanwhile, took out several photographs from the folder. "Here, in case the video isn't enough. The key moments are captured here. This will be enough for the court." Nathan stole a glance at the pictures and then turned away, squeezing his eyes shut. In one of them, Laney was kneeling in front of a stranger, naked, with one of the men's neckties tied around her arm, and another man pressed against her behind. In another, she was straddling Travis while Griffin held her breasts. These sexual fragments cut like knives into Nathan. He grabbed the trash can from the table and, unable to control himself, vomited. The contents of the stomach splashed onto the papers. Dana quickly threw them aside, supporting him by the shoulders. "That's it, that's enough. There's no need for more," she said quietly. Nathan closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. For the first time he saw them with his own eyes evidence of treason, betrayal on such a scale that he could not even imagine in a nightmare. And yet it was reality. After a few agonizing minutes, he calmed down a little. He leaned back in his chair, feeling mentally tired. "What? What's next?" he asked barely audibly, wiping his mouth and wet eyes with a trembling hand. Dana's face was sad and firm at the same time. "Next, we will use all this. I have already filed for divorce on your behalf, as we discussed, and I'm preparing a lawsuit for moral damages and destruction of marriage against Griffin Sloan. In some states, such claims allow you to seek compensation from your lover, and we have quite good reasons, to put it mildly." Nathan nodded automatically. Words about judicial steps reached him through a veil. He suddenly felt an icy calm covering the previously raging fire of emotions. "Okay," he said in a colorless voice. "Do what you need to do, Dana. I've had enough." Dana squeezed his hand. "Well done for holding on. But also give yourself time. This is a huge shock." He nodded, looking down. Then he asked quietly, "Can I be alone for a few minutes?" "Certainly." "I'll go out." Dana stood up and left him in the silence of the office. Nathan slouched at the table, covering his face with his hands. The faces of Griffin and Travis flashed before his eyes, grinning, self-satisfied predators, and Laney willingly became their prey. Inside, through the pain, rage arose, cold as ice and sharp as a blade. He did not know what would happen ahead, but he knew one thing: these people should not go unpunished. They took away what was most precious to him, trampling him into the dirt. When he left Dana's office a few minutes later, there were no more tears in his eyes. Only firmness and determination mixed with deep mourning. A long struggle awaited him for justice, for his future without lies. And Nathan was ready to start this fight, no matter what. Over the next few days, Nathan's life became a whirlwind of legal affairs and repressed emotions. On Dana's advice, he temporarily moved to a small rented apartment, which he found through friends, citing an emergency at work at home. He needed space to recover and not see Lainey. In their house, there were only ghosts of a happy past, and next to her, he was afraid to break down ahead of time. Every evening, Lainey wrote him messages, asked when he would be back, and said that he missed him. Nathan answered briefly, citing his busy schedule. He felt that she was worried, but now it didn't bother him much. All attention was on the upcoming proceedings. Dana acted quickly. Just 2 days after watching that terrible video, they filed an official petition for divorce, citing adultery as the reason. Lainey had not yet been notified. The lawyer decided to wait a couple of days to prepare a parallel civil suit against Griffin Sloan. We will sue him for intentional infliction of emotional harm and destruction of the family, Dana explained, laying out the papers on the table in front of Nathan. In our state, you can still file a lawsuit against your lover for the so-called destruction of marriage. They don't win in every case, but we have indisputable evidence of Sloan's immoral behavior, which led to grave consequences for you. Nathan sat opposite him, nodding mechanically. There was an emptiness in his soul, which was filled only by the goal of finishing what he started. "What amount can we talk about?" he asked dully. "We will file a claim for a large sum," Dana answered confidently. "Within reason, but noticeable to him. Let's say $1 million. The corner of Nathan's lips twitched into something like a bitter grin. $1 million, the price of a ruined life. Ridiculously little, if you think about it, but a noticeable punishment. Yes, it wasn't even about money. There was simply no other measure of responsibility for Sloan. "Okay," he said. "Let there be $1 million. Dana looked at him carefully. "Are you ready for this to become public knowledge? Such lawsuits often attract attention, especially if Sloan's name comes up." "Let it be," Nathan shrugged indifferently. "I have nothing to be ashamed of." "He should be ashamed." The lawyer nodded. "Then tomorrow I will send a statement of claim to the court and a copy to its lawyers." On the third day after the papers were filed, Griffin Sloan himself called Nathan. He saw the boss's name on the phone screen, and his heart skipped a beat. He expected Sloan to react sooner or later. Nathan forced himself to answer in a level voice. "I'm listening." "Harper," Sloan's voice was harsh, without the usual velvety courtesy. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to discuss with you outside of the court," Nathan snapped. "Don't be stupid, guy," Griffin said. "You understand what you got yourself into. Drop this idiotic lawsuit, and we will resolve everything amicably. As your boss, I can close my eyes to a lot of things." Nathan was furious at how brazenly he continued to command, as if what had happened was just a minor misunderstanding. "Amicably?" he asked again in a choked tone. "Are you kidding?" "Not at all." Sloan's voice grew colder. "You will receive generous compensation and quietly resign on your own. Why wash dirty linen in public? Do you think anyone cares about your feelings? They'll laugh at you, Nathan. Come to your senses before it's too late." "Generous compensation." Nathan squeezed the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "Are you suggesting that I sell Lainey and I's humiliation?" "I suggest we don't ruin your career and life further," Sloan muttered. "The trial is long and dirty, and this way you will receive the money immediately. More than the court will award, believe me." Nathan felt sick to his stomach at his cynicism. "No, Sloan," he said quietly but firmly. "Now everything will be according to the law." Griffin chuckled on the phone. "According to the law, you say? Well, wait and see." "Yes," Nathan couldn't resist making a barb. "We'll see in court a video of you and your son having fun with my wife. I will watch with interest how you will then look into the eyes of your partners." There was an ominous silence on the line. Sloan didn't seem to expect Nathan to have these notes. His voice, when he spoke, no longer sounded so confident. You have no right to distribute this video. This is private life." "You're wrong," Nathan snapped. "There is such a thing, evidence, so get ready." "You'll regret this, Harper," Sloan spat at the end. It will be worse for you. We'll meet you in court, Nathan said calmly and disconnected the call. After hanging up the phone, he stood for several minutes, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. Maintaining a calm tone was more difficult than he thought. Sloane was clearly scared, but still relied on his power and money. Well, so much the worse for him. On the same day, a board of directors met at the company's office to discuss the current situation. Nathan had heard rumors from colleagues that Sloane had retired for a while, handing over control to a deputy, allegedly for health reasons. Apparently, he was still afraid of publicity. Nathan was awaiting his formal meeting with management regarding his dismissal. He himself also had no intention of remaining in the company a day longer than necessary. That evening, he received a call from Jonathan Mays, a longtime friend and former colleague who now worked at another IT company. Upon hearing the news, Jonathan expressed complete outrage at Sloane's actions and support for Nathan. Moreover, he hinted that he would be glad to have Nathan on his team when he decides to move on. Nathan thanked him, feeling for the first time in a long time something like relief. Although the bridges with his current job had burned, a new road was dimly looming ahead. Meanwhile, there was another conversation brewing that Nathan couldn't avoid. Lainey. She clearly felt that something was happening. Accumulated suspicions and anxiety about their relationship forced her to persistently seek frankness. In the evening, she called him on his mobile. "Nathan, dear, how long can you work? We hardly see each other." There were tears in her voice. "Did I do something wrong? Why are you moving away?" He sat in an empty apartment, holding the phone in his hand, and looked at the wall in front of him. He was so disgusted with the lie that he could barely restrain himself from shouting the truth in his face right away. But Dana reminded him once again, there is no need for haste. They have all the evidence. We must act in cold blood. "I have a very difficult project, Lainey," he answered dryly. "I can't talk." "You don't even come home," she almost shouted. "Don't I deserve a couple of minutes of your time anymore? We're family." Family. Lies, Nathan thought bitterly. "Sorry. That's the way it should be," he said, and ended the call. He knew that this couldn't last long. Soon she will receive a summons for the divorce proceedings, and then she will not be able to hide it. Perhaps it was time to set the stage for a decisive conversation, to give her a chance to speak out for herself. He wanted to hear from her a confession, an explanation, at least something real, not a lie. Nathan dialed Lainey's number himself after several hours of agonizing thought. "Nate," her voice broke with hope and fear. "We need to talk," he said slowly. "To be honest." There was silence on the line. Then she asked quietly, "About what?" "About us. About what happened." He closed his eyes, gathering his courage. "Just the truth, Lainey, if you still respect me even a little." He heard her breathing rapidly, like a hunted animal. "You, what are you talking about?" She tried to avoid a direct answer. Nathan clenched his teeth. "About Griffin Sloane, and about the party you were at." On the other side, the silence was long and heavy. Then Lainey burst into tears. "I'm sorry. Please, I'll explain everything. Just don't hang up." His heart sank with pain and disgust, but he remained silent, allowing her to speak. I didn't mean to. It all turned out this way." Lainey sobbed. "Griffin has been paying attention for a long time. He is so charismatic, and I felt abandoned or something while you were busy with work. This is not an excuse, I know, but that evening I drank too much. They started everything. It was some kind of terrible dream, as if I couldn't control myself." She cried almost hysterically. Nathan listened, clutching his phone. "Why didn't you leave?" he finally asked dully. "Why did you stay overnight?" "I was drunk. And—" She began to breathe intermittently. "I was ashamed. Then Griffin begged me not to tell anyone, promised that it would be between us. He said that if you found out, you would leave me. And I was scared. I didn't want to lose you." Nathan smiled mirthlessly at this twisted hypocrisy. She was afraid of losing, but not afraid of betraying. This wasn't the first time, right? He asked the next painful question, already knowing the answer in his soul. "No," After a long pause, she admitted in a whisper, "A few weeks ago, Griffin and I, it happened after dinner with him. I then swore to myself that I would never do it again, but he persuaded me to meet again, and I was like a fool." Her voice was drowned in sobs. Nathan closed his eyes. My heart was pounding, but now not a drop of surprise. The stain on the underwear he found probably came from that first time. All this was recorded on a tape recorder lying nearby on the table. Dana insisted on recording the confession, although it was already clear to Nathan that there was no turning back. "Lainey," he said evenly, when the flow of her tears and incoherent apologies had subsided slightly, "thank you for finally telling the truth." "Can you forgive me?" she stammered. "I'm ready to do anything, anything to make amends." Nathan was silent for several difficult seconds. Before his eyes stood the image of the woman he loved, whom he trusted, and the image of the woman from the video as if two different people. Forgive. He himself did not know whether this was possible, while all feelings were mixed into a ball of pain. "I don't know, Lainey," he finally said quietly. "We'll talk soon. For now, I need time." He passed out, not listening to her new pleas. I immediately forwarded the recording of the conversation to Dana. The silence that followed the call was deafening. Nathan realized that everything that could be done had already been done. The evidence had been collected. The words had been spoken. All that remained ahead was to officially break this rotting connection and try to survive among the wreckage of his heart. When Lainey confessed everything and sobbed begging for forgiveness, Nathan felt something inside him completely snap. He didn't tell her where he was going, he just asked, "Give me time." For several days in a row, he avoided meetings and conversations and did not answer the phone when Lainey called. He spent the night in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of the city, where he moved immediately after the call. The sparse furniture and half-empty walls did not give a feeling of comfort, but they did not overwhelm us with memories. Everything here was alien, a blank slate. His broken heart hurt, but he knew there was no turning back. Dana prepared a package of documents for divorce, and he decided to sign. This meant that the former life was completed. All he had to do was go through the official process, listen to Lainey's endless excuses, and perhaps look into her tear-stained eyes one more time. But now at least he didn't feel trapped in his own doubts. The truth was known, the masks were removed, and the path to freedom, albeit painful, was visible ahead. A few days later, Nathan, leaving the lawyers to take care of business, took a short vacation to recover at least a little. He sat in his empty temporary home, feeling a strange silence spreading inside him. It was as if the storm that had raged for so long had begun to subside, leaving devastation in its wake. One thought haunted him. Lainey had finally confessed. Not completely, frankly, she still tried to justify herself, either with alcohol or with Griffin's charms, but the fact is undeniable. She cheated on him more than once, deceived him while he, suspecting nothing, made plans for their future. This realization was bitter, but not new. Now, having heard her confession, he felt rather relieved. Masks are off. He no longer needs to be tormented by guesswork. Dana said that Lainey's testimony, although not official, would help the case, but in fact, they were doing a good job with their evidence base. It was important to record the fact that Lainey does not deny adultery. This task was over. Now all that remained was to survive the process itself and try to move on with life. Nathan reread the recording of their conversation. Dana prepared the transcript for herself and felt strangely detached. He had already cried tears. The pain turned into quiet melancholy. It felt like that stage of life had finally ended. Shortly before the trial, he chanced upon Lainey in his lawyer's office. She came to sign some divorce papers. Nathan caught her leaving Dana's office. Lainey noticed him and froze. It was their first face-to-face meeting since that morning's conversation at home and the subsequent telephone confession. Lainey looked lost. No makeup, in a simple coat, a knitted hat, although before she always carefully selected the image. It must have been difficult for her these days, too. They looked at each other for a couple of seconds. Nathan didn't even have anything to say. Everything had already been said. "Hi, Laney smiled dimly. "Hello," he responded calmly. "I signed." She nodded at the documents in her hand. "How are you?" "Fine," he shrugged. "And you?" Laney lowered her eyes sadly. "I'm alive. As much as I can." Nathan nodded. "Nate," she suddenly said, "thank you for listening to me. I know nothing can be fixed, but it was important to me, you know." He nodded silently again. There was no impulse inside to blame or forgive. It was empty. Apparently, this is how the end of feelings manifests itself. "Good luck to you," she added quietly, "at the trial and in general." "Thank you." Laney took a hesitant step towards him, as if she wanted to hug or touch him, but decided against it. Instead, she headed towards the exit without looking back. Nathan looked after her, feeling only slight sadness. Everything is gone. Later that evening, he opened his laptop and reviewed the footage of Clark at the party, the ones he could mentally handle. Photos of Griffin touching Laney, of Travis showering her with attention. He tried to understand, was she happy then with them? Or was she playing a role? Perhaps he will never know the answer. Nathan closed the folder and erased the copy of the video from the screen. He didn't want to reopen the wound anymore. The main thing is that the evidence was kept securely by the lawyers. Let them serve the cause now. On the eve of the trial, Dana asked if he wanted to see Laney at the trial. She could testify if she wanted, but most likely it would be unnecessary. Nathan firmly refused. He didn't need to hear her words anymore. Everything that is important has already been said. All they have to do is formalize the final legally. The day of trial was approaching, and with it the end of a long and difficult chapter in the life of Nathan Harper. A week after the start of all the turmoil, Nathan finally said goodbye to the company to which he had devoted the last 5 years. The formalities were routine. The resignation letter was signed without any questions asked. Apparently, the management decided to quietly send him out, hoping that the scandal would subside with him. On his last day at the office, Nathan packed his personal belongings into a box: several books on programming, a photo from a company party where he and Laney were still smiling happily. He smiled bitterly and threw it in the basket, and a couple of souvenirs from colleagues. There was tension in the air. Some co-workers peered into his office with awkward sympathy as news of his divorce, and especially the lawsuit against his boss, leaked out. However, no one asked directly. Everyone was afraid to touch on a painful topic. A senior manager approached him to say goodbye. "Nathan, we, really appreciate your input. It's a shame it turned out this way." "And I'm sorry," Nathan answered briefly, not wanting to go into details. He understood. The company preferred to hush up the story, making his departure appear voluntary in exchange for neutrality. Well, he had no intention of seeking anyone's loyalty anymore. He walked out of the office building with a box in his hands, stopping for a moment at the entrance. Once this place was a symbol of his success, but now it caused only bitterness. But as Nathan left, he also felt relief. His job, his friends, and his future were no longer here. Everything was left behind like a scorched field. Jonathan Mays was waiting for him near his parked car. The old friend smiled and raised his hand. "Should I throw the box in your trunk?" "Thank you." Nathan handed the things to Jonathan, and they got into the car. "Well, congratulations," Jonathan grinned, driving out onto the road. "Welcome to the club of those who quit miserably." Nathan smiled wryly. "Glad you can joke about it." Jonathan gave him a quick, sympathetic glance. "Sorry, I know it's not easy for you right now, but honestly, you did the right thing. There's nothing left for you to catch there." "Yeah," Nathan said quietly, looking at the familiar neighborhoods stretching along the road. "Thanks for lending your shoulder, John." "Nonsense. We don't abandon our own," the friend said seriously. "I'm glad you accepted my offer. We are just launching a new project. Your experience will be very useful." "I'll try not to let you down," Nathan nodded. The office center where Jonathan's company was located loomed ahead. New place of work, new people. Nathan felt both anxiety and a faint flicker of excitement. Will he be able to concentrate? Will he be strong enough, given the personal hell he's going through? But sitting idle was even worse. Heavy thoughts would swarm in the emptiness of my head. Work promised to distract me, to give me purpose. In the reception area of the new office, Jonathan tapped him on the shoulder. "You can start from tomorrow. I've already sorted out everything with the personnel. Will you take a couple of days to rest, or are you eager to fight?" Nathan shrugged. "Tomorrow is tomorrow. I still can't sit at home." Jonathan nodded understandingly. "Okay, then let's go introduce you to the team." They walked along a bright corridor into a spacious room where several people were working at computers. Jonathan introduced Nathan to his colleagues. "Friends, meet our new network security specialist, Nathan Harper." Several faces turned and greetings were heard. Nathan smiled politely and nodded. He wanted to hide from unnecessary attention, but he understood that it was necessary. One of the colleagues, a thin guy with glasses, came up to shake hands. "Oh, I read your articles on cybersecurity. Glad to meet you in person." "Thank you," Nathan replied, somewhat embarrassed. A couple more people exchanged a few phrases with him. Jonathan showed him his workplace, a small table by the window, already equipped with new equipment. "Make yourself comfortable, make yourself at home," Jonathan smiled. "The people here are good, without meanness." He spoke the last words quietly, and Nathan felt a lump of gratitude in his throat. His friend deliberately emphasized that he was morally safe here. After lunch, he and Jonathan went up to the roof of the building, where there was a small lounge area for employees. There were tables and coffee machines. Below is a view of the city. "How are you?" Jonathan suddenly asked while they were drinking Americano from paper cups. "Not like a pro, but like a human being." Nathan shrugged, looking thoughtfully into the distance. "It's been better. But they help me, and you help. I went to a psychologist, as you advised." Jonathan nodded approvingly. "Glad to hear. This is right." The wind ruffled the hair on his forehead, and Nathan suddenly felt how this fresh air seemed to blow away some of the heaviness from his head. He is in a new place, a friend is nearby, the unknown is ahead, but not so frightening. "If anything happens, call me any time," Jonathan added. "And don't forget, you are not alone." Nathan smiled faintly. "I know. Thanks, buddy." As the workday ended, he realized that he hadn't thought about Laney, Sloan, or the trial for several hours. Being immersed in new tasks was distracting. It was so strange, and it relieved my soul so much, at least for a little while. Nathan headed into his empty rental apartment for the first time with some semblance of a peaceful feeling inside. A new stage has begun. Even if the problems did not disappear, a step forward was taken, and life slowly moved on, even if the heart had not yet had time to heal the wounds. Several more weeks passed. The divorce proceedings and the lawsuit against Sloan were picking up speed somewhere in the legal corridors, but everyday life also required attention. Nathan tried to move on with his life. He threw himself into work during the day, and in the evenings he returned to an empty apartment where the refrigerator hummed quietly and sometimes his cheekbones ached from loneliness. One day Jonathan invited him to dinner at a small family restaurant. "Come, I want to introduce you to a person," he said meaningfully on the phone. Nathan agreed, although not with much enthusiasm. He didn't really want to make new acquaintances, but he couldn't refuse, knowing that his friend was trying for his own good. On the appointed evening, he entered a cozy room with candles on the tables. Jonathan was already sitting at a corner table with an unfamiliar woman. Taking a closer look, Nathan noted her pleasant, calm face and the attentive look of her gray eyes. "Here he is," Jonathan smiled, getting up. "Nathan, meet Rose Hanley, a very good psychologist and my good friend." The woman extended her hand. "Nathan, good to finally see you." "I've heard a lot from Jonathan." "It's a pleasure," Nathan replied politely, shaking her hand. He cast a playfully reproachful glance at his friend. "They say, are you plotting pimping with a psychologist?" Jonathan just grinned in response. "Just be patient." They ordered light wine, pasta, and salad. At first the conversation was about nothing, about the weather, about tastes in food. Rose turned out to be a tactful and gentle woman. She didn't rush at Nathan with questions, On the contrary, she told funny stories from practice, jokingly describing some funny cases. Nathan smiled several times as he listened to her. Jonathan also encouraged the conversation, but gradually fell silent, giving them the opportunity to talk. After the main course, Rose looked closely at Nathan. Jonathan said, "It's not easy for you right now. You know, I don't want to interfere without asking, but if you need to talk it out, I'm ready to listen to you, as a friend and not as a psychologist if you want." Nathan met her gaze and suddenly felt a lump in his throat. For the last month, he had been carrying so much pain within himself, hardly sharing it openly with anyone. Yes, there was a conversation with Dana, with Jonathan, but he did not talk about the depth of his feelings, about how the betrayal of his beloved woman broke him. He suddenly had an urgent desire to tell everything, or at least a part, so that he would be understood not as a client, but simply as a person who is in pain. He took a sip of water, clearing his throat. "It's really very difficult for me. Sometimes it seems as if all this is not happening to me, but that I am observing someone else's nightmare from the outside." Rose nodded, silently encouraging him to continue. "We were so happy, you know." Nathan's voice trembled, but he continued. "We had plans, dreams, and then I suddenly find out that all this time." He stopped short, feeling a storm rising in his chest. Rose gently covered his hand with hers. "You found out that your wife betrayed you." Simple, clear words that made Nathan wince but nod. "Yes, and in the most terrible way imaginable." And his breathing hitched. "I feel completely crushed. My dignity, my faith in people, everything was destroyed in one moment." He did not notice how tears appeared in his eyes. Rose didn't let go of his hand. "It's okay to feel what you feel," she said quietly. "You were betrayed, and you are now experiencing grief, essentially, the loss of a relationship that was the meaning of life." Grief. Nathan repeated, pondering the word. "You know, yes, it's like someone died. My old life is dead." "Exactly," Rose squeezed his hand lightly. "And you have the right to mourn her. Get angry, feel empty, whatever. There is no need to be strong for the show." He lowered his head. He wanted to burst into tears right there, but he held back. "The question that hurts the most is, why?" Nathan whispered. "Why did she do this? Did I love little? Did I try little? What's wrong with me?" Rose shook her head. "Unfortunately, sometimes people cheat not because there is something wrong with their partner, but because there is something wrong with themselves. Or with circumstances, but in the end, it is their choice. It's not your fault, Nathan." These words seemed to shed balm on the wounded soul. He was looking for guilt in himself. He was tormented, but she said so directly, "It's not your fault." But then, "She loved me too, or did it all seem to me?" He asked with anguish. "How can you treat someone you love like that?" Rose smiled sadly. "People are complex. Perhaps she loved, but at some point she allowed her weaknesses to take over. This is her mistake. Her weakness is not yours." Nathan closed his eyes, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Sorry," he wiped his face with a napkin. "Don't apologize," Rose said softly. "You're in pain, it's natural. Release this pain, don't keep it inside." Jonathan, who had been tactfully silent all this time, put his hand on his shoulder. "We're with you, buddy." Nathan took a deep breath, trying to control himself. "Thank you. I'll probably ruin your evening." "Nonsense," Rose smiled. "We are here for you. Jonathan is very worried about you, and I really want to help." They talked for a long time. Nathan talked about what he was silent about, how he felt deceived, how empty he woke up in the morning, how he was afraid that he would never be able to trust anyone again. Rose listened attentively, occasionally interjecting short phrases of encouragement or asking leading questions. She did not give ready-made recipes for happiness, there were none. But this warm acceptance alone made Nathan feel a little better. At some point, he realized that he was not ashamed to cry in front of them, that these people are true friends who will not judge. When the restaurant was almost empty and the waiter delicately hinted at closing, the three rose from the table. Outside, they were greeted by the cool night air. Rose hugged Nathan goodbye. Hold on. And remember, you have someone to call if things get tough. She thrust her business card into his hand. This is if you suddenly want to formally work with a psychologist, but also call informally. Nathan thanked her, feeling another lump rise in his throat, this time of gratitude. Jonathan put his arm around him. Glad you agreed to come. Come on, I'll give you a ride. Nathan was silent the whole way home, looking out the window. But for the first time, his soul was not so painfully heavy. They helped him carry out part of the load. He realized that the path to recovery would be long, but the first step had been taken. He admitted his pain, allowed himself to be weak. And it was in this openness that I found a drop of strength to continue living. A few days later, after a difficult but cathartic conversation with Rose and Jonathan, Nathan felt strong enough to put an end to it. I needed to meet Lainey face to face one last time. He chose Saturday morning for this. Lainey knew he would come. They agreed to meet at the old house to discuss the future. In fact, the future was already predetermined, but Nathan decided to give her the opportunity to hear everything directly. He crossed the threshold of their once cozy nest with a heavy heart. Everything was the same in the living room, the same furniture, the same smell of vanilla and home. Only the feeling was different, as if he were a guest in the ruins of his life. Lainey was waiting for him, sitting on the couch. She jumped up as soon as he appeared. She looked exhausted. She had lost weight. There were shadows under her eyes. Her hair was simply pulled back into a ponytail without the usual styling. Nathan, she breathed, crumpling the handkerchief in her hands. Thank you for coming. He nodded silently and walked into the room. They looked at each other for several seconds, not knowing where to start. Nathan noticed how her fingers trembled and how her eyes darted. Pity stirred in his soul, but he suppressed it, remembering the video and all the humiliation he had experienced. You wanted to talk, he began calmly, even coldly. I'm listening. Lainey swallowed. I wanted to ask for forgiveness again. For everything. I have no excuse. What I did, it's disgusting. I hate myself for this. Her voice broke and tears streamed down her cheeks. But Nathan stood with his arms crossed, his face stony. Nathan, she continued, sobbing, if I could take it all back, I would never. Never again. I was drunk, stupid, I got carried away. Griffin spoke beautiful words, I lost my head. But I love only you, honestly. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing these familiar, once dear words. I love only you. How bitterly ironic. Do you love it? He asked quietly. After what happened, Lainey stepped closer, trying to take his hand, but he retreated. Don't come closer. Just don't, he said harshly. She froze, wrung her hands. I understand. I just want you to know that it's not your fault. You have no guilt. I'm the one who ruined everything. Can you ever forgive me? Even just, as a person? Nathan was silent for several seconds. Rose's words flashed through his head that he was not to blame for what had happened. Lainey was saying the same thing now. You know, he finally said wearily, I realized one thing. I need forgiveness more for myself than for you. And I try to forgive you. Not today, but someday, perhaps, I will finally forgive so as not to carry this burden of hatred. Lainey looked up at him with hopeful eyes. Is it true? But, he continued firmly, this doesn't mean that I can forget or accept back what happened. The hope in her gaze faded. Nathan took a thin folder from his bag and threw it on the coffee table in front of the sofa. Several photographs slipped out of the folder and fanned out. Lainey stared at them in horror. In the photograph closest to her, she recognized herself naked, intertwined in the arms of several men at once. She screamed sharply, as if she had been wounded with a knife, and stepped back, covering her face with her hands. No, please, don't. It's too late to say no, Lainey, Nathan said sternly. It hurt him to watch this, but he forced himself. I saw everything. Do you hear? All. She lowered her hands, looking at him with eyes wet from tears, in which animal fear and shame splashed. Who gave this to you? She whispered. Doesn't matter. It's important that this is now part of the case file, he snapped. It's between you and Sloan. Are you doing? She wiped away her tears with a trembling hand. What's the matter? Divorce, of course, and a lawsuit against Sloan. Do you think I'll just leave it like that? He will answer for what he did. And you, Nathan's voice trembled with anger. You've already got yours, I think. Live now with this knowledge. Divorce. Lainey echoed, looking into space. It was as if for the first time she realized the inevitability. Yes, he nodded. I filed for divorce. You will receive official papers soon. Lainey fell to her knees in front of him, folding her hands. Please, don't leave me. I understand everything, but my life without you makes no sense. I'm on my knees asking. Nathan looked down at her. He once dreamed of how she could be on her knees in front of him, but not like that, but in a wedding dress, asking for something funny or playfully. Now this sight evoked only pity and disgust for what they both had turned into. Get up, he said tiredly. Don't humiliate yourself anymore. She stood up, leaning on the chair, staggering slightly. He noticed a cross on a chain on her neck. She apparently began wearing it recently. She had not seen it before. Irony. Nathan, she spoke again, wiping her face. I realized that I was sick. I need help. I've already made an appointment with a psychotherapist. I go to church. I, I feel very bad without you, she spoke confusingly, trying to find any arguments. Maybe there's at least a chance. 1 in a million. I can earn forgiveness. He shook his head. No, Lainey. There is no more us. Our marriage died the night you stayed at Sloane's. His voice softened for a moment. You know, I've been asking myself for a long time why. But I don't want to know anymore. It won't change anything. Lainey stood with her shoulders slumped. It was as if the tension had lifted from her, as if she realized that the battle was lost. I won't resist divorce, she said quietly. I'll sign everything as you say. Nathan looked at this broken, sobbing woman in front of him and suddenly felt nothing. Emptiness and fatigue. The love is gone, the anger is burned out. All that remains is sadness that it all ended this way. I appreciate it, he replied just as quietly. You have no reason to do otherwise. He took the photographs from the table, not wanting to leave them with her. There was no point. Lainey suddenly spoke again in a trembling voice. Can I at least give you one last hug, please? Nathan hesitated. His soul stirred contradictorily. On the one hand, he wanted to remain adamant. On the other, this was farewell, and maybe the last manifestation of humanity would not change anything. Okay, he finally breathed. Lainey approached carefully and wrapped her arms around his neck. He felt her trembling, her quiet cry on his chest. He didn't raise his hands himself, he just stood there, allowing her to cuddle for a couple of seconds. There was no response inside, no warmth, no former tenderness, only a faint shadow of former closeness. After a moment, he gently pulled away. Goodbye, Lainey, he said firmly, looking into her eyes for the last time. Please take care of yourself. She sobbed, Goodbye. Turning around, Nathan walked towards the exit, leaving behind his once home. He didn't look back even once. A quiet groan was heard behind him, turning into a sob, but he continued to move forward. My heart sank in pain, but at the same time I felt a strange relief. It was all over. He did everything he could. Further only forward, only to a new life, where there will be no more lies. The courtroom was full of muted noise and anticipation. The Harper v. Sloan case attracted the attention of the press. Prominent businessmen are rarely involved in such family destruction lawsuits. Nathan sat next to Dana at the plaintiff's table, feeling his palms sweat. The verdict was due today. Griffin Sloan was a few meters away, at the defendant's table with his team of expensive lawyers. He looked pale and aged. In recent months, he lost his position as CEO of the board of directors. Learning about the scandal forced him to leave of his own free will. Sloan's reputation was destroyed. The media savored the details of the trial, and the video of sex with a group of men, although not officially made public, became a town rumor, and many details leaked out. The son, Travis, did not appear at the meetings. but according to rumors, went abroad to wait out the storm. Nathan looked at his once confident boss and didn't recognize him for the brilliant predator he was. Now a broken man sat in front of him, avoiding eye contact. "Stand up, the trial is coming," announced the bailiff. Everyone got up. The judge entered, an elderly man with a concentrated face. "The decisive moment has arrived." The judge announced that the jury had reached a verdict. The defendant, Griffin Sloan, was found guilty of intentionally inflicting emotional harm on the plaintiff, Nathan Harper, by destroying his marriage. There was silence in the hall, only the cameras of journalists in the far part were clicking. As compensation for moral damages, the judge continued, the court awards payment to the plaintiff in the amount of $1 million. A rumble ran through the hall. Even though he knew they were asking for that amount, Nathan still felt a shock when he heard it officially. He exhaled, feeling Dana squeeze his hand under the table. Sloan closed his eyes and lowered his head. His lawyers began to whisper, but it seemed that Griffin himself could no longer hear anything. For him, it was a crushing defeat. The judge continued to read the decision. In addition to compensation, the defendant must pay legal costs and formally apologize to the plaintiff in writing. Nathan listened, but part of his consciousness was already drifting away. He won. Officially, legally, the truth was on his side and confirmed by the court. When the meeting adjourned, Dana hugged Nathan. "We did it. I'm so happy for you." Journalists buzzed around them, trying to get comments. Dana, as an experienced lawyer, delicately refused to give details, only stating, "Justice has been done." Nathan stood up, feeling his legs tremble. He looked towards Griffin Sloan. He was still sitting, despite the fact that those around him were already collecting papers. For a moment their eyes met. There was emptiness and despair in Sloan's eyes. He tried to get up and approach, but the bailiff was immediately nearby, perhaps fearing an unpredictable reaction. However, Griffin only shook his head, as if he didn't believe what had happened, and leaning heavily on the cane that he had started using lately, headed towards the exit, escorted by the guards. As he passed by, Nathan caught a faint odor of drugs and alcohol on him. The once brilliant Sloan has become a shadow. Nathan did not feel triumphant, only quiet satisfaction and, strangely, a share of pity. Yes, pity for the man who had everything and ruined his life with his own vices. But it was a well-deserved payback. Walking out of the courthouse onto the sunlit steps, he took a deep breath. Reporters surrounded him, asking questions. "Mr. Harper, are you satisfied with the decision? How do you intend to dispose of the compensation? What would you say to your former boss now?" Nathan raised his hand to attract attention. "I am grateful to the court for a fair decision. Money is not what I started all this for. I needed justice and confirmation that such actions do not remain without consequences." The journalists immediately began shouting new questions, but Nathan was already moving away to Dana, who was waiting for him. "Excellent words," she praised. He shrugged. "They are true. Money. Of course, I will need it to start a new life. But the main thing is that I feel like I can put an end to it." Dana sneered. "Now everything is officially over. The divorce is also practically finalized. In a few days, there will be a court decision." The divorce case went quickly. Laney did not object, and they managed to resolve everything without unnecessary disputes. She was left with the house. Nathan did not lay claim to it, and they had almost no significant joint assets. He just wanted to leave the past behind. "Thank you, Dana," Nathan said, looking into her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled. "Such work. And I'm glad I was able to help an old friend." They hugged. The camera's flash flashed somewhere on the side, capturing this moment, but Nathan didn't care. That evening, the news was full of headlines. "Scandalous trial. Sloan is obliged to pay an ex-employee $1 million. Revenge of a deceived husband, justice triumphs." Somewhere in the depths of his soul, Nathan felt proud, not that he had taken revenge, but that he had found the strength to go through this and achieve justice. When he returned home, now to a new rented apartment, which he began to gradually settle into, The first thing he did was call Jonathan and Rose to tell the news. His friends joyfully congratulated him and immediately invited him to celebrate his victory over the weekend. After hanging up, Nathan sat down on the couch. The victory was bittersweet. She will not return his love and his former life, but she paid tribute to him for what he experienced. He looked at the envelope with a copy of the court decision. $1 million, the price of betrayal. In the end, life cannot be measured by money, but let this amount be a reminder to Sloan of his sins, and for Nathan a resource to start everything from scratch. Autumn imperceptibly turned into winter. Nathan and Lainey's divorce has been made official. They practically did not communicate. There was no reason, no strength. Nathan tried to build a new life step by step. He managed to rent a small apartment closer to work, continued therapy with Rose, and gradually learned to live alone. One day in January, Lainey herself asked for a meeting. She called from an unknown number. "Nate, it's me. Please don't hang up." Her voice was quiet, cracked. "I'm listening," he answered reservedly. "I need to see you. This is important. I have to tell you something." Nathan wanted to refuse at first, but there was such desperation in Lainey's voice that he reluctantly agreed. "Fine. Where?" They agreed to meet in a city park on a quiet alley where they once loved to walk together. The next day, wrapped in a scarf against the piercing wind, Nathan arrived at the place ahead of schedule. He was nervous, not knowing what to expect. Lainey arrived soon, walking slowly through the crunchy snow. She looked even more haggard than when they last met. Pale face, deep shadows under her eyes. On her head was a warm knitted cap, from under which strands of dull hair were escaping. "Hello," he said quietly. "Hello," she responded, stopping a step away from him. For some time, they simply looked at each other against the background of a deserted winter park. "What happened, Lainey?" Nathan broke the silence. "You said it was important." She lowered her eyes. Her lips trembled. "Yes, very important," she said, and took a deep breath as if gathering her courage. "I was diagnosed with HIV." The words hung in the frosty air like a cloud of steam. Nathan was dumbfounded. While he understood the risk given the events, hearing it directly from her was a blow. "When? How?" That was all he could say. "I took the tests a month ago," she answered dully. "Apparently, it happened then, at that party. There's simply nowhere else." Nathan ran his hand over his face. He suddenly remembered that terrible video recording, and everything inside sank. It is not surprising such carelessness rarely remains without consequences. The first thought, a selfish one, was, what about himself? But they had no intimacy since then, long before the betrayal, and even more so later. In addition, after the trial, he was still tested. The result was negative. He then breathed a sigh of relief. Lainey, as if reading his thoughts, said, I really hope you're okay. Have you been checked?" "Yes," he answered briefly. "Everything is clean with me." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Thank God." There was silence. Snowflakes swirled around, settling on their shoulders. Lainey sobbed. "I deserve it. The Lord punished me." Nathan couldn't find anything to say. Conflicting feelings fought in his soul. On the one hand, the bitter, "it serves you right," rose to his lips. On the other, looking at her breaking down in front of him, sick and unhappy, he could not rejoice. "I started treatment," she continued in a broken voice. "Antiviral therapy, all that. Doctors say they are now living with it. But—" She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Why did you want to see me?" Nathan asked softly. Lainey removed her hands, tears sparkling in her eyes. "Ask for forgiveness. I know that I already asked, but then it was perhaps not entirely sincere. And now I know exactly what it feels like when life collapses. I wake up every day thinking about my guilt. I need you to know that I'm terribly sorry. Not about getting caught, but about betraying you and ruining our love." Her voice broke. Nathan felt a lump rise in his throat. He was silent, allowing her to say everything that had accumulated. "You were the best thing in my life," she continued through tears. and I destroyed everything, and now I'm paying in full. If I could bring back that evening, but it's too late. I just ask you if you can. Forgive me, not as a husband, as a person, so that I can move on with at least the hope of forgiveness." She fell silent, looking expectantly at him through a curtain of tears. Nathan looked down at the snowy path. Just a couple of months ago, he would have responded to such a request with anger or sarcasm. But too much had happened, and his heart was gradually freed from hatred, displacing it with tired sadness. He sighed quietly. "You know, Lainey, I thought for a long time about whether I could forgive you. For my own sake, not for yours. And probably yes, I forgive you." She glanced at him. "Really?" There was something simultaneously relieved and disbelieving in her voice. "True," he nodded. "I don't hold a grudge. Your betrayal destroyed our love, but I'm sorry that you're sick. It's a shame it turned out this way." Lainey burst into tears, covering her mouth with her hand. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you. You have no idea." She made an impetuous movement forward, as if she wanted to rush to hug him, but stopped in time, remembering that she no longer had the right to do so. He didn't come any closer either. "I appreciate your words," Nathan continued. "I hope you take care of yourself. Now you have another fight ahead for your health. I sincerely wish you to find strength within yourself." Lainey cried, nodding. You, you are an amazing person. I'm so sorry for you." "That's enough." He stopped softly. "Don't reproach yourself more than you already are. Live on, as long as you can, as best you can, and may everything be calm for you." He wanted to say good, but the word stuck. It probably wouldn't be good anymore, but at least it would be calm. They stood very close, and at the same time infinitely far away, two once dear people who had become strangers. Finally, Lainey whispered, "Thank you for listening. I will not forget your kindness." Nathan smiled sadly at the corners of his lips. "Goodbye, Lainey. Take care of yourself." She responded in kind. "Goodbye, Nathan, and thank you." At the beginning of spring, the city was rocked by shocking news. This morning, while scrolling through his phone feed, Nathan came across a headline that gave him a chill. "Former tycoon Griffin Sloan is found dead. Police are investigating a double murder-suicide." Nathan's hands shook as he opened the article. There, in dry language, the unimaginable was stated. Late in the evening, tragedy occurred at Griffin Sloan's country villa. Neighbors heard shots and called the police. Arriving officers found the bodies of Sloan, his adult son Travis, and a woman identified as Lainey Harper in the house. Preliminary evidence indicates that the 55-year-old businessman first shot his 25-year-old son and a 30-year-old woman before committing suicide. Nathan froze, rereading the lines. "Lainey, killed Griffin." He reread the paragraph several times, refusing to believe it. The article went on to say, according to sources, shortly before the tragedy, Griffin Sloan found out that he was infected with HIV and, presumably, blamed his former mistress and even his own son, who could also be infected. The exact motives are being established, but the investigation is inclined to believe that Sloan, while depressed and under the influence of alcohol, committed this terrible crime. The phone fell from Nathan's hands onto the car seat as he parked, unable to drive any further. My heart was pounding loudly in my ears. Lainey is dead, killed by the very person who started the whole nightmare. He was shaking. Some wild sound escaped the lips, either a groan or a sob. Lainey's face from yesterday appeared before my eyes, pale, grateful for forgiveness. And now she is no more. He just managed to forgive, and Nathan found his phone with difficulty and called Dana. She already knew. "Nathan, did you see the news? God, I'm shocked." "This is true," he croaked. "I'm afraid so," she answered heavily. "Detective Mercer called me this morning and confirmed." Dana fell silent, unable to find words. Nathan didn't remember how he got to work or returned home. The day passed in a blur. One thought was spinning in my head. She died. They are all gone. How is that possible? Why did it end this way? In the evening, he met with Jonathan, and Rose's friends rushed over as soon as they heard what had happened. They were sitting in his living room. Rose herself was shocked. "This is such a terrible ending, you wouldn't wish it on anyone." Nathan sat staring at one point. "He killed her, and his son, and himself," he repeated hoarsely, as if trying to comprehend. "Can hatred really go that far?" Jonathan answered quietly. "I think his mind has gone dark. I lost everything, my career, my health, and so I lost it, and dragged others away." Nathan added bitterly. Rose put her hand on his knee. "Nathan, this is not your fault. This is Sloane's choice and action. Understand?" He nodded, although his heart still sank from the monstrous reality. The next day, the news was full of details. It turned out that both Travis and Griffin himself were confirmed to have a positive HIV status. Apparently, upon learning of this, Sloane flew into a rage, blaming Laney as the source. Police found a suicide note where Sloane wrote that he was punishing those responsible for his death. It looked like the delirium of a distraught man. Nathan attended Laney's modest funeral. She has almost no relatives left, a couple of friends and a cousin. He stood aside, not daring to come close. When the coffin was lowered into the ground, everyone's tears flowed. Nathan felt a strange detachment, as if it were a stranger's funeral, and at the same time the pain of loss pierced him. He mourned not the woman who betrayed him, but the one he had once loved, the image of the bright, smiling Laney, with whom he had happy days. After the ceremony, he nevertheless approached the fresh grave, when the others had dispersed, and laid a white lily on the loose soil. "I'm sorry it's like this," he whispered quietly. "May you now be at peace." The wind scattered his words. Nathan stood there for another minute, saying his final goodbyes. Sloane and Travis were buried without too much publicity in a narrow circle. He didn't go there. In the evening, already at home, Nathan took out a notebook, a diary, which he kept on Rose's advice. He opened the post from the day before. "Hate destroys." She destroyed Sloane, destroying those around her as well. Bitter truth. Griffin's sick heart decided to take revenge in the most monstrous way, and in the end he himself turned to dust, taking lives. Nathan closed the diary. The tears have dried. All that was left was quiet sadness and fatigue. Life spun such a spiral of fate that it was impossible to imagine. The tragedy has reached its limit, but he survived. He stood in the midst of the wreckage, wounded but alive, and it was probably worth fighting for. Several months have passed. Time had not completely healed Nathan's wounds, but it had dulled the pain. Spring has come into its own, and with it, little sprouts of hope began to sprout in Nathan's heart. One April evening, he stayed at work late. There was almost no one left in the office, only the light was on in the next apartment. Cindy Stone worked there, his colleague, with whom he had become good friends in recent months. Cindy was a cheerful and kind girl, always ready to cheer up with a word or a cup of coffee. She knew that Nathan had gone through a divorce, but she didn't ask for details, feeling the boundaries. She was simply there. She told funny stories, invited him to lunch with the team, sometimes left homemade cakes on his table with a smiley face on the note. That evening, after turning off the computer, Nathan stopped by to say goodbye to Cindy. "Hey, are you still here?" Cindy looked up from the monitor and smiled. "Yes, I'm finishing the report. You're up late too, as always." "That's all for today." He tiredly rubbed his neck. "It's time to go home." She nodded and suddenly, as if struggling with herself, blurted out, "Listen, shall we go somewhere for dinner? Otherwise, go home and there the mental work will begin again. We need to unwind." Nathan hesitated for a second. Previously, he invariably refused, preferring loneliness. But today something trembled inside. He suddenly didn't want to go to the empty apartment. "You know, let's go," he replied. Cindy smiled happily. They chose a small bistro nearby that served excellent steak. At a table by the window, listening to soft jazz, Cindy chatted about all sorts of trifles about the new film, about how her dog learned to fetch slippers, about plans to go to the mountains for May. Nathan listened, feeling his soul gradually thaw. He found himself wondering that he had not experienced such simple pleasure for a long time, sitting like this, talking about nothing important, laughing at jokes. "I'm so glad you agreed to go out," Cindy said when dessert arrived. "Otherwise, it's all work and work." "And I'm glad," he admitted honestly. "We need to do this more often." Cindy looked carefully into his eyes. "Listen, don't be offended by the question, but how are you now?" "Well, in general." Nathan understood what she meant and did not prevaricate. "That's better. Is it true? It was very difficult, but life goes on." She smiled warmly. "You are strong. Many would have broken." He shook his head. "Not that strong. Without friends, I would definitely be lost." "Well, you have friends, you can be sure." Cindy raised her glass of mineral water as if offering a toast. Nathan clinked his glass of juice. "For friends. And to new beginnings," she added softly. "To new beginnings," he agreed, feeling these words reverberate like a bright wave in his chest. After dinner, they went outside. A warm spring evening bathed them in the aromas of flowering trees. Cindy walked next to him, and suddenly Nathan felt a strange excitement that he had almost forgotten the same thing that happens on dates. It wasn't officially a date, though, just a friend's dinner or. He caught her gaze affectionate, supportive. Suddenly, he realized that he wanted to take her hand. After a short internal struggle, he made up his mind. He carefully touched her fingers, intertwining them with his own. Cindy did not pull her hand away. On the contrary, she squeezed his palm a little tighter and smiled so that Nathan felt warmth spread throughout his entire body. They walked slowly down the street. Ahead could be seen the lights of the night city, bustling and indifferent. But at that moment, Nathan felt like he was part of this world again, not a hiding, not a wounded animal, but an ordinary person who could feel good. "You know," he said quietly, "I haven't been so calm for a long time." "That's good," Cindy replied. "You deserve a little peace and joy." Nathan thought about all the storms he had been through, about how a year ago anxiety arose in him, which was justified by a terrible betrayal, about how he went through the hell of pain, anger, judgment, loss, how I found the strength to withstand and not become completely bitter, and how now this chapter of life is finally closing. Walking past the shop window, he caught a glimpse of their reflection. Here he was walking, holding a cute girl's hand and even smiling. In the reflection was the present, and behind were the ghosts of the past. Cindy, without letting go of his hand, talked about some funny incident at work, and Nathan listened, noticing to himself how pleasant her voice sounded. He realized that he was looking forward, maybe not with confidence, but also without horror. The future no longer frightened him with emptiness. That evening, as he walked Cindy home, he felt a slight thrill. He wanted to kiss her. And when she stood on her tiptoes in farewell and softly touched his cheek with her lips, Nathan became emboldened and responded with a gentle kiss on the corner of her lips. Cindy blushed and beamed with a smile. "See you tomorrow," she whispered. "See you tomorrow," he answered warmly. Returning home under the starry sky, Nathan found himself thinking about tomorrow with slight excitement and pleasant anticipation. It was a new feeling, not pain, not anxiety, but bright hope. He looked at the sky, where a thin moon was breaking through the clouds. Somewhere there, he believed, Laney's once beloved soul had found its peace. And here on earth, he continued to live, and was ready to let new feelings into his heart, without forgetting the lessons of the past. Life went on, and Nathan Harper, having experienced betrayal, loss, and retribution, finally took the first step towards a new life after it. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.